Hey friends, welcome back to our cozy corner of midnight history. Tonight, we're cracking open the soot-black doors of the castle kitchen to find out exactly why the poor cook was always one bad ladle drop away from total collapse. Before we throw another log on the hearth, do me a tiny favor. If you genuinely enjoy these rambling bedtime stories, hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And while you're down there, slide into the comments and tell me where you're listening from and what ridiculous hour you've chosen to hang out with me. I love seeing the little constellation of blinking screens light up across the globe. Now dim the lights, cue that gentle fan hum, nestle under clean sheets that any medieval servant would openly weep over, and let's time travel together. While the water warms, you inventory supplies scratched onto a beeswax tablet. Let's see: barley, half barrel; oats, questionable; salt pork, too salty if that's possible; dried peas, rock hard; onions, sprouting wild enthusiasm; 5 wheels of cheese, blue with mold, but that's fashionable; and precisely 4 eggs, each one worth more than your yearly wage if served to the wrong guest. Spices: 3 peppercorns, a pinch of cumin, and a fantasy about saffron you once read in a minstrel's tale. Butter: only if the dairymaid's cows felt generous, which they didn't because it rained sideways for a week. Breakfast for the garrison is easy: barley pottage served with pride and 0 seasoning. You dump grain into boiling water, stirring with a paddle the size of an oar. The mixture thickens into gray sludge that clings to the pot like guilt. You ladle portions into wooden bowls, sprinkle exactly 3 flakes of salt, and send the scullery boy shuffling off into pre-dawn fog. He returns moments later grinning. The soldiers grunted approval. High praise. You treat yourself to a sip of small beer, barely alcoholic but safer than water, and it tastes like relief mixed with wood smoke. Now the sun peeks over the battlements, bleeding pale orange through arrow slits. Time for the Lord's breakfast, which, naturally, is a performance. The steward bustles in, waving a parchment of demands. Stewed apples with honey, pigeon pie lightly spiced, and smooth oat gruel strained through cloth so as not to offend delicate sensibilities. You resist the urge to laugh. Apples, you have 3 shriveled specimens. Honey, only a spoonful left. Someone's been thieving. Pigeons, they roost in the eaves, but trapping them requires stealth and a ladder you don't own. You improvise. Dice the apples, poach them in watered-down ale, and sweeten with the last honey, plus a prayer. For the pie, you substitute last night's leftover chicken disguised under flaky crust and a good story. Seasoning: a single peppercorn crushed painstakingly with your knife pommel. Culinary alchemy at its finest. While pastry bakes, you multitask like a one-person army. The laundry fire died, so the laundress borrows embers, hollering that your hearth is hotter than Hades. The butler sneaks in to sample ale and complains it's weak as ditch water. You tell him politely to stand closer to the oven vent and inhale deeply. He leaves in a coughing fit. Problem solved. A kitchen maid arrives with news. The Lord's hounds need offal for breakfast or they'll start chewing the tapestries again. You dispatch another boy to fetch guts from yesterday's hare carcasses, then spin back to stir the pottage before it scabs over. You serve the Lord's tray, bowls balanced like a precarious tower, praying the crust disguises the chicken. The steward eyes it, sniffs theatrically, but says nothing. Victory smells exactly like slightly burned pastry. Mid-morning is supposed to be a lull. But medieval life laughs at lulls. The castle priest pops in unannounced, fasting in theory, but allowed thin broth by some convenient church loophole. You simmer water, Add herbs, whisper an apology to flavor, and hand him a cup that tastes like warm garden. He blesses you, thankfully not noticing it's mostly nettle. Then come the repairs. One of your cauldrons sprung a leak. Yes, iron can leak if cracked by heat and age. You tilt it, inspect the fissure, and apply a paste of clay and crushed eggshells. It won't last, but that's future use to spare. Noon bells clang. Time for the main meal, confusingly called dinner. The menu springs from the steward's imagination. We require roast beef, braised cabbage, and trencher bread, plus a sweet flummery for her ladyship. Roast beef? You have at best a tough joint that spent 3 days aging in questionably cool air. You massage it with salt, skewer it on an iron spit, and set it to roast, turning slowly, basting with drippings collected in a battered pan. Braised cabbage is simpler. Shred it, toss into ale with lard and onions, let it stew until it admits defeat. Trencher bread means giant flat rounds baked hard so they double as plates. You mix barley and rye into dough, knead until your wrists ache. Slap rounds onto the oven floor. 10 minutes later, smoke billows. Someone forgot to clear last night's embers from the back wall. You wave a rag, cough, pray no one orders dessert ever again. Speaking of dessert, flummery, a creamy pudding thickened with oats and flavored with rose water you definitely don't possess. Solution: milk simmered with dusty cinnamon scrapings and sweetened wine to fake floral notes. By the time everything's plated and marched upstairs, your tunic is soaked, your hair smells like smoked hog, and you've tasted nothing because testing food is a firing offense if the Lord suspects you of stealing flavor. You might think the afternoon brings respite. Wrong. The granary clerk needs your signature, well, your mark, since literacy is for monks, approving grain allotments. The kitchen roof drips again, requiring you to climb on a barrel and wedge straw between stones. A messenger arrives, dusty from the road, demanding spiced wine. You serve him lukewarm ale with a wink. He's too tired to complain. Meanwhile, mice have discovered your dried peas. You set traps, wooden blocks with springy triggers that snap with alarming violence. 2 minutes later, snap, squeak, silence. You'll clean that later. Right now, the cauldron crack you patched has failed, and boiling water rivers across the flagstones. You leap, curse, grab towels, old tunics really, and damn the flood. Feet soaked, spirits damp. Late afternoon shadows creep like plotting conspirators. Supper preparations begin. Lampreys for the Lord, slippery eels considered a delicacy, and vegetable pottage for everyone else. Catching lampreys means bribing the castle fisherman. You trade him a slice of mold-edged cheese. He hands over 3 lampreys and a grin toothier than a saw. Filleting them requires steady hands. They writhe like animated nightmares. You pin them, slice, hear that wet squelch, feel your stomach protest. Too bad. Smell of blood mingles with onion peel and smoke until your nose goes numb. The sun finally sinks. Torches sputter alive, throwing dancing shadows that make hooks look like lurking monsters. You ladle supper into pewter dishes, garnish the lampreys with parsley to distract from their snake-like heads, and dispatch servants to the great hall. Feedback arrives swift and brutal. The lady found a bone in her soup. You promise firmer straining tomorrow, swallow your pride, and plot how to strain liquid with cloth that doubles as your only hand towel. Night, at last, tiptoes in. You scrub pots with sand and handfuls of straw, rinse with precious hot water, watch grease shimmer on the surface like mocking rainbows. Your back bows, your arms tremble. You check stores for tomorrow, barley barely, ale half, salt dwindling. You'll need to haggle at market soon, meaning a 5-mile slog through mud just to overpay for wilted greens. Joy. You extinguish the hearth. No embers allowed overnight, lest the place burn, but not before banking a small coal under ash to coax to life before dawn. You peel off your wool tunic, scratch madly, discover 3 new flea bites and a mysterious burn mark shaped like an iron hook. Souvenir of the day. You collapse onto straw, too tired to notice the damp. Your last waking thought, do it again tomorrow. All right, welcome back, midnight travelers. Shake the ash off your boots, refill the mug with whatever passes for coffee at this hour, and slide deeper under those scandalously clean sheets. We're picking up right where we left our unfortunate castle cook, flat on his straw pallet, limbs twitching from phantom ladles, brain buzzing with the burnt-on smell of lamprey goo. Took a breath? Good, because the darkness outside is already fading into the bleary charcoal of pre-dawn, and you know what that means. Round 2 of culinary combat. A single church bell bong rattles your skull like dice in a cup. You lurch upright so fast the fleas get whiplash. Your first groggy instinct is to pray time has mercy, but time is a tight-fisted landlord. You've overslept by, 8 whole minutes? And in kitchen math, that's roughly the length of a small civil war. Boots! Where are the boots? You find them by scent more than sight. Tug them on and discover one toe squishing in something suspiciously warm. Mental note, interrogate the cat. If it was the cat. If there is a cat. Out in the corridor, a draft slaps you awake harder than any caffeine ever will. Torches gutter low, leaving smoky halos that carve every stone into a haunted face. You hustle past the pantry door and hear scratching inside, probably rats performing their nightly interpretive dance. Not today, you mutter, but you know they'll win eventually. Rats never sleep, and neither, it seems, do you. Step 1. Revive the hearth. You kneel and poke around yesterday's ash mound, fingers blackening instantly. There's your precious coal, glowing like a dying firefly. You feed it twigs, coax with lung power until sparks leap into flame. And just like that, the kitchen is alive again, hissing and crackling like a gossip circle. The smoke punches straight for the roof beams, then changes its mind and circles back to sting your eyes, because the chimney flue jammed sometime after midnight. You grab a poker, ram it upward, dislodging what looks like a scorched bird's nest, plus half the roof's dust quota. Coughing, tearing, you glimpse dawn's first light through the slit windows. Another day hired to torment you. The morning ration for foot soldiers is supposed to be hearty, code for anything that stays in one piece when slopped into a trench-digging stomach. You find the barley sack and nearly faint. A hole gnawed the size of a goblet and grains spilled everywhere like traitorous confetti. Rat prints stare up at you like tiny signatures of insult. You salvage what you can, sift out droppings with bare hands, and rinse the kernels in lukewarm well water that smells faintly of pennies. Good enough. Nobody inspects breakfast that closely, especially not men too hungry to speak. While the barley simmers into its trademark despair gray goo, you remember the shepherd dropped off a scrawny sheep's head yesterday as partial rent for grazing rights. Excellent. Protein. You hack the skull in half with the butcher knife, more rust than steel, scoop out what passes for brains, and swirl them into the pot. Voila, surprise nutrients. You taste a speck with a fingertip. Metallic, earthy, not entirely terrible. Into the bowls it goes, along with a drizzle of rendered fat saved from the lampreys. The soldiers won't know why they feel strangely alert at midday. You'll take the silent gratitude. The scullery lad dashes in holding a cracked wooden mug.
"Cook, sir, the steward says the Baron caught a fever overnight, wants restorative broth straight away." Of course he does. You search for chicken, nothing but bony carcasses. You improvise. Toss a handful of garlic, 3 withered leeks, some of yesterday's beef drippings, and the tiniest shred of mint into a smaller pot. Simmer, skim, whisper a blessing. You pour it through linen so thin it's practically philosophy, and present a cupful so clear it almost looks intentional. The lad runs off. You hope the Baron's palate is fuzzy from fever. Next crisis arrives on 2 legs and a bad attitude, the butler. He waddles in, cheeks flushed from pre-lunch tastings, waving a parchment. His lordship expects honored guests by sundown, a hunting party of 6 knights, plus their retainers. They demand a proper welcome feast. Venison, fresh bread, pastries in the shape of falcons. Oh, and mulled wine flavored with oranges. He sniffs as if oranges grow on castle ramparts. You bite your tongue and nod. The butler waddles off, convinced his job is done. Venison. Where are you going to find deer meat on 4 hours' notice? You dash to the courtyard, nab the kennel master who's tossing scraps to the hounds. Any chance yesterday's hunt bagged more than bragging rights? He scratches his beard. 1 scrawny doe, not yet skinned. He'll trade for 2 pints of ale and first crack at the offal. Bargain struck. You drag the carcass to the kitchen like a reluctant dance partner, flop it onto the butcher block, and commence an anatomy lesson no one asked for. Your knife catches bone, slips, nicks your thumb. Blood joins the deer's on the board. You wrap the gash in a rag, keep cutting, humming through the sting because there's no time to bleed properly. Meat secured, bread next. You need fine white loaves for nobles, not the gritty trencher discs of barley. White flour is locked in the pantry under the steward's key. You find the steward arguing with a chambermaid about missing linens. You step in, voice Syrup sweet. "My lord needs bread fit for kings. I need the good flour." He eyes your blood-streaked tunic and decides the linens can wait. Key handed over, you sprint back, measure out the precious snow-white powder, each handful worth its weight in peppercorns. Mix with water, a splash of ale, and yeast scraped from yesterday's dough. Knead, pound, fold, pray. Set the rounds near the hearth to rise. Now those pastries shaped like falcons, cute. You have maybe 3 fistfuls of lard and a jar of questionable honey, no fancy molds. You roll dough thin, carve beak shapes with a dull knife, pinch wings into place, paint with beaten egg so they'll brown golden, and dot eyes with poppy seeds stolen from the infirmary's laxative stash. Into the oven they go. If they resemble chickens in the end, you'll call them fledglings and hope nobody's an ornithologist. On to mulled wine. Real oranges? Not happening. But rose hips can fake a citrus tang if you boil them hard enough with a scrap of cinnamon. You raid the herb nook. Toss dried hips, cinnamon bark, a shard of clove into a cauldron of cheap red wine. Sweeten with adulterated honey, you dilute it with hot water when nobody's looking. The scent that rises is suspiciously festive, masking the sourness nicely. Hours blur. Steam beads on every surface. Your hair sticks to your forehead like damp parchment. The venison must roast slow to stay tender, so you skewer one haunch on an iron spit, position it just so, and enlist the spit boy to crank steadily. He's 10, scrawny, and half asleep. You bribe him with a heel of soft loaf, rare treasure. He grins gap-toothed and turns the spit like a living clock gear. Mid-afternoon, thunder outside, of course. Rain pounds the narrow windows, drips through roof seams, splatters embers. You drag a wooden shield from the armory, don't ask how, and prop it over the worst leak. Sizzle, hiss, crisis averted.
Sudden shriek from the pantry. The dairymaid discovered your flour theft tally. You soothe her with words about essential hospitality, slip her an extra chunk of blue cheese, and promise to mention her butter in tomorrow's menu. She calms, resumes churning, muttering what you hope are compliments. The butler returns, this time demanding amuse-bouches. Little bites before the feast. The knights expect refinement. You nearly laugh yourself unconscious. Refinement. You rummage and find salted almonds, soak them briefly, roast with a whisper of honey and the last pepper. Toss into a pewter bowl. Tiny luxuries that will vanish in seconds, but register as sophistication. Evening rushes in, dragging the guests with it. You feel floorboards vibrate under their boots as they clank inside, stamping rainwater, shouting for ale. The steward barks orders, servers scurry like startled sparrows. You line platters, roasted venison glistening, cabbage braised in bacon fat, fresh white loaves steaming, falconish pastries perched in neat rows, bowls of almonds, and gravy thick as loyalty oaths. Torches flare, a trumpet blares, the feast begins above. Down here, you hover near the stairwell listening for catastrophe. First comes laughter, good sign. Then a cheer. Someone yells, "Well roasted." You sag against a barrel, nearly weeping with relief. But the night's not done. The knights drink like dehydrated camels. Empty jugs pile up. The butler orders more mulled wine. You stretch the batch with watered-down ale. Toss in extra rose hips, send it up. Nobody notices. Later, a serving maid reports the falcon pastries were delightful, though one knight used his as a projectile in a drunken contest. You'll take it. After-feast cleanup begins around midnight. Platters return smeared with grease, half-gnawed bones, trencher bread soaked through and doubled as plates for sauces. You scrape scraps into a bucket, pig fodder, and stack dishes for the scullery team, consisting of you and 2 sleepy children. Hot water is fetched, soapwort beaten into suds, plates scrubbed till your nails peel. At some point, your thumb bandage slips off into the dishwater, and you whisper a quick eulogy. Finally, silence settles, except for the rain's persistent hiss. You bank the fire again, eyes gritty as sand. Inventory tomorrow's disaster. Flour gone, honey depleted, venison bones glistening. But the guests leave at dawn, so breakfast must impress. Meat pies for the road? Porridge laced with dried fruit they'll assume is imported? Future you will juggle. You limp to your pallet, but halfway there the chaplain emerges from the shadows, pale as candle wax. He mutters about the Baron's fever worsening, needs more broth, maybe a posset with egg and wine. You nod like a puppet whose strings are moldy, trudge back, start another flame. Wine, egg yolk, spoonful of that precious honey water, warm till frothy. You carry the cup yourself through silent halls, deliver it to the chamber heavy with incense. The Baron lies sweating, eyes sunken. His wife thanks you in a whisper, first kind word you've heard in days. It warms deeper than the hearth. You return to the kitchen, legs numb. Straw pallet finally greets you like an old conspirator. Rats scamper in the rafters, you don't care. You close your eyes, smelling smoke, venison, mulled wine, and rain-damp stone. A perfume called Exhaustion Number 13. Sleep crashes over you without dreams. Okay, night owls, tighten those cloak clasps and sip what's left of your lukewarm ale, because the sun hasn't even bothered to rise, and our poor castle cook is already neck-deep in tomorrow's disasters. Technically, it's still the same night. Time is a flat bread when you live by hearthlight. But the rooster will crow soon enough, so let's call this Fresh Hell Day 3. You jolt awake to the sound of something wet hitting stone. For one blissful second you think rain found a new leak, but no, your stomach just reminded you that you sampled every gravy on last night's menu. Great. You wipe your mouth on a sleeve, laundry day is a rumor, and push upright, joints crackling like thawing ice. There's work to do, and regret is a luxury item. First priority, inventory. You drag a splintery ledger from beneath a tureen, snap off the quill's crusted tip with your teeth, and do the math nobody else will. Flour, almost gone. Honey, half a thumb width at the bottom of the jar. Salt, plenty if you count the damp brick of it fused to the bin. Barley, enough to sink a ferry. Vegetables, a few onions pretending not to sprout, cabbages that smell like self-doubt, and carrots the color of heartbreak. Meat, haunch bones only. You close the book before it grows teeth and bites you. Second priority arrives on squeaking hinges, the gatehouse runner. Barely 12, wearing boots 2 sizes big and a grin 3 sizes bigger, he blurts, "Cook, the bishop's retinue is 5 miles off and riding fast. He'll want luncheon at noon sharp. Steward says make it penitential yet impressive." Then the child vanishes, leaving the scent of wet wool and panic. Penitential yet impressive, that's like asking for a humble crown or a quiet trumpet. You mutter a prayer in culinary Latin and crank the hearth back to life. The bishop's known for sermons about temperance delivered between gulps of spiced wine, so you plan a menu that screams moderation while whispering decadence. Lentil pottage thickened with marrow will look austere but taste like velvet. Flatbread scented with rosemary, pious because it's flat, indulgent because rosemary costs more than a stable boy's yearly wage. For protein, you settle on eels stewed in ale. Slimy? Yes, but eels still wriggle in winter barrels when everything else is frozen, and their silver skins glisten like holy relics under candlelight. Perfect. You swing open the cold room door and freeze. The floor is awash in brine, barrels toppled like defeated soldiers. Yesterday's storm rattled a shutter loose, cold winds snapped a rope, and your precious fish supply is now fermented soup. You kneel, lift a herring, it dissolves between fingers. The smell could resurrect the plague. Eel's barrel? Split, contents gone. Probably a dog had a feast and died happy somewhere. You've got 6 hours and no main course. Fantastic. Emergency plan, pigeons. The castle roof swarms with them. They're technically property of no one, and your knife is still sharp. You dash to the parapet stairs, climb into gray dawn. Wind whips your cloak, but the birds are drowsy on their ledge, cooing lullabies. You scatter grains of yesterday's barley as bait. Wait, then fling a net borrowed from the laundry line. Flap, flutter, curse of Saint Columbanus, success. 12 plump squab, wings beating furiously. You bundle them in your tunic like contraband and race back down, praying no guard asks questions. Plucking feathers is a snowstorm of fluff, but you move fast, dunk birds in boiling water, strip them clean, and split them open. Their tiny hearts still twitch. You toss the bits into a cauldron with wine, onion, and a dash of the bishop's own imported saffron, procured via one unlocked spice chest and moral flexibility. Luncheon protein secured. Halfway through stirring, the scullery girl bursts in, cheeks blotched red. "Cook, the knights from last night are ill, room after room of groans and leaks." Your heart drops into your boots. Food poisoning? You tasted every dish. You're upright. But Noble's moaning spells blame, and blame flows downhill to the kitchen. Think, that venison was fresh, bread baked right, but the mulled wine, rose hips, honey stretch, cheap barrels.
Maybe the barrels. You shove dread aside. Crisis triage matters more than innocence. Honey-buttered sage tea, you tell the girl. Boil it thick, deliver to each bed. Sage covers sins, honey soothes throats, and hot liquid keeps them from marching down here with swords.
No respite. The steward materializes like mildew, face sweaty. His lordship wants assurance dinner will proceed despite these intestinal disturbances. Also, a courier arrived. He hands you a scroll sealed with red wax. You pop it open. Words dance. To the castellan and household. His Majesty King Edward and entourage, numbering 50 souls, shall take lodging within your walls 3 nights hence as part of the royal progress. Ensure adequate banquet. 3 nights hence, 72 hours until the king, the court, and enough protocol to choke a dragon arrive expecting splendor. Your knees actually buckle. You grip a table to steady yourself. The steward mistakes your horror for enthusiasm. I knew we could rely on you, he says, and waddles away humming. Bishop first, king later. Focus. You ladle pigeon stew into pewter bowls, garnish with parsley leaves for virtue, and set loaves of rosemary flatbread in reed baskets. Servers march them up the spiral stairs right as the chapel bell tolls midday. You listen for reactions. A moment of silence, followed by a satisfied humming bass. The bishop. Good. Then clinking cutlery. Luncheon, at least, is safe. As you scrub pigeon grease from your arms, a soldier staggers in, hand over stomach. Cook, something moves inside me like demons. He retches into a bucket. The smell confirms your dread. Spoiled fish brine seeped under the kitchen door and tainted the servant stew you served at dawn. 20 more soldiers ate it. That's your fighting guard. If sickness spreads, the castle defense is a wet noodle when the king arrives. You mix charcoal powder, mint, and ale, medicinal sludge, and force a mug into his shaking hands. Drink all, you command. He does, eyes watering, then slumps onto a bench to sweat it out. Evening approaches. Rain ended, but left mud everywhere. The bishop finishes prayers and requests a light supper, meaning 6 courses. You grab turnips, cabbage, barley, safe foods. While chopping, you overhear 2 pages gossip. The bishop loved the pigeon, but suspects it's dove from the castle dovecote, a sacred symbol. If he asks, you'll swear the birds volunteered for martyrdom. Twilight colors the sky bruised purple. You set out bowls of barley turnip mash drizzled with butter, herb-stuffed cabbages, and a custard sweetened with stolen quince jam, simple yet smugly holy. Upstairs, the bishop compliments moderation while licking his spoon. Success number 2. But during cleanup, a server whispers that 3 more knights are groaning, 1 fainted. This outbreak isn't stopping. You need a scapegoat before dawn. You find the butler sniffing casks in the wine cellar. Those barrels came from the town merchant, you begin, voice low. I tasted mold in one, but the steward insisted. You're not proud, but deflection is survival. The butler's eyes widen. He hates the steward. Perfect. You plant enough doubt that by morning the illness is blamed on bad wine, not your kitchen. Ethics? Welcome to medieval loyalty. Midnight again. You collapse on a stool, feet throbbing like drums. Yet your brain whirs with the king's impending visit. 50 mouths, maybe double if you count escorts, all expecting lavish courses. Swan, boar, pies that bleed crimson fruits when sliced, sweetmeats molded into castles. Your larder is emptier than a monk's dance card. You'll need to beg, steal, borrow, maybe invent alchemy. You draft a mental list. Send hunters for wild boar. Send fishermen down river at dawn. Raid the Abbey garden for herbs. Commission bakers in the village to pre-shape crusts. You'll need cheese, fruits in syrup, nuts, exotic spices, candles, table linens without suspicious stains, and musicians who can drown out chumping noises. All in 72 hours. The math is insultingly impossible. Sleep is a rumor again, but exhaustion finally drags you into hazy dreams of talking chickens reciting menu plans. You wake before dawn to hammering on the door. The gatehouse boy again, soaked. Cook, the bishop departs after Mass and wants journey cakes for the road. Of course he does. Journey cakes, dense oat rounds, sweetened with dried berries. You mix oats, drizzle watery honey, toss in currants saved for Advent, flatten into discs and slide onto the hot hearthstone. While they bake, you draft the hunter's orders on a scrap. Bring boar or bring your hides. You seal with grease. Ink is gone. Mass ends, carts creak. Bishop blesses the household, and his men load baskets of journey cakes still steaming. He hands you a silver penny, actual wage. You tuck it inside your boot for luck. As hooves clatter away, you allow a single exhale of triumph. Then the steward appears waving another parchment. The royal harbinger requests tonight's supper be modest. The king prefers to arrive to a fresh larder, not leftovers. Translation: feed the castle staff, but save delicacies for later. Small mercy. Breakfast for the household is porridge, again seasoned with resignation. You add chopped apple cores for flair. Soldiers still look pale but upright, so your demon-banishing charcoal brew worked. You give each a clove of garlic for good measure. The barracks will smell like a siege of vampires, but you need them alive. Mid-morning, you venture to the village. Mud sucks at your boots. Mist clings like gossip. You meet the miller's wife. Trade the bishop's silver penny for 2 heavy sacks of fresh wheat flour, white as winter clouds. Next, the beekeeper. He's hoarding honey for Lent, but you promise him rights to leftover pig bones, gold for soup, and he parts with 2 jars. You buy chickens on credit and bully a brewer into donating a keg of his finest ale for the royal toast. Your cart creaks home overloaded, but hope rides shotgun. Afternoon. Hunters return victorious with not 1 but 2 young boars lashed to poles. They demand triple ale rations for speed. You agree and throw in leftover journey cakes. Reciprocity matters. You string the boars up, slit bellies, spill steaming guts into a bucket for sausages later. The smell is hideous yet promising. Meat secured. While skinning, you plan course progression. First night, simple welcome, roast boar with apple, trenchers of buttered peas, stewed prunes for digestion. Second night, spectacle, swan glazed in saffron, pies of venison and quince, tower of sweetmeats. Third night, farewell feast, whole salmon in parsley sauce, almond tarts, spun sugar castles if you can coax the confectioner from the Abbey. Ambitious? Yes. Doable? Maybe, with bribery and caffeine, if caffeine existed. But disaster never sleeps. A thunderclap of shouts erupts outside. The kennel master chasing a dog that's run off with an entire side of boar. You sprint after, skid over mud, crash into a water barrel, soak head to toe. The dog darts under a cart, snarling. You bribe him with hunks of stale bread, grab the meat, now coated in dirt, and lug it back. You rinse under cold pump water, praying parasites can't swim. Sunset paints the sky copper. You stoke the ovens to firestorm, rub boar joints with garlic, sage, and salt, scraped off that brick with your dagger hilt. You slide them into heat so fierce your eyebrows curl. Flour mixed with yeast becomes dough, draped over bowls to rise. The scullery children shape tiny hedgehog rolls by clipping snouts with scissors. Cuteness calms nobles. Night falls. You sip ale straight from the brewer's keg, quality check, and feel strength seep back. The castle corridors echo with talk of the king's arrival. Anxiety is contagious. You hear the butler rehearsing titles, the steward reciting seating charts, maids mending tapestries by moonlight. Everyone's frantic, but you are the engine keeping this panic train on rails. Before collapsing, you inspect the cold room repairs. Shutter barred, barrels upright, fresh straw to soak leaks. You scatter mint sprigs to mask lingering rot smell. Satisfied, you drag your straw pallet near the dying embers for warmth. Rats peer from shadows, but keep distance. Even they respect a cook on the brink. Eyes close, but mind tallies tasks. Collect swan from the Lord's pond tomorrow. Convince falconer to spare dove feathers for garnish. Brew hippocras spiced wine. Source sugar from Moorish traders passing through market. Carve trenchers. Polish pewter. Teach servers which side to present dishes so the king sees crackling skin first. Somewhere between trenchers and pewter, sleep grabs you. Dream. You're back on the roof netting pigeons, but they morph into crowned pastries and fly away laughing. You wake to pre-dawn chill and the realization that day 4 will begin with slaughtering swan, birds with beaks like daggers. No rest for the culinary wicked. Ready or not, dawn slaps you awake like an overzealous stable boy with a wet rag, and day 4 greets you with breath so cold it turns your exhale into tiny ghosts. Your joints ache, your hair smells like smoke-marinated pork, and somewhere a rooster is crowing off-key on purpose, you're sure of it. First priority today, kidnap some royal swans. Technically, they belong to His Majesty already, but since he's not here to supervise, you figure it's more of a relocation project than a crime. You grab a burlap sack, a length of twine, and the falconer's thick gloves, he'll complain later, and tromp down to the pond with fog curling over black water like witch's brew. The swans spot you, hiss, and paddle away with regal disdain. You scatter barley along the bank. Bribery works on nobles and birds alike. Then wait, crouched, trying not to shiver loud enough to scare them. One bold male glides up, neck arched into a question mark. You lunge, bag open, but he explodes into wings, flaps every curse word in bird language, and smacks you across the face with a beak that feels like iron. 2 more join the rebellion, and suddenly you're a one-person slapstick routine. Sack tangled, boots slighting, feathers everywhere, pond water in your mouth tasting of old algae and heartbreak. After a full minute of chaos, you manage to tackle one sizable swan, pinion its wings, stuff it into the sack, and tie a knot while apologizing in advance for the orange glaze you'll drizzle over him tomorrow. You repeat the process until 3 birds fume inside burlap, hissing and thumping like drums. That should be enough centerpiece meat for the royal table. You haul the living luggage back toward the kitchen, ignoring bruises blooming across your shins like midnight violets. Halfway to the gatehouse, a snowflake lands on your nose. You look up, sky the color of pewter, clouds pregnant with trouble. It's late autumn. Snow this early is Mother Nature muttering, "Good luck, idiot." By the time you reach the courtyard, the flurry has graduated to a full-fledged storm, flakes thick as goose down. Great. Hunters won't track anything in this. Fishermen won't row, and carts delivering sugar and spices will bog in drifts. You mentally add "invent sled" to your list. Inside, the kitchen is blessedly warm, fire already stoked by the bleary-eyed scullery kids who sleep on sacks of turnips. You dump the squirming sacks in a corner pen, toss them grain, and tell them to stay calm. Lying to birds now, new low. Then you notice the flour barrels you bought yesterday. You pried the lids off last night, right? Wrong. They're still sealed, and the sudden cold has drawn moisture. You pry a lid and find the top layer clumped into gray goo. Weevils bob like sailors on porridge. Deep breath. 1 bad barrel you can handle. 2 makes you curse the miller's entire family tree. You salvage what's dry, sift through cloth, and spread kernels near the hearth to crisp. At this point, hygiene is a myth. You're just trying to keep the protein content low enough nobody notices extra crunch.
Steward arrives, robe hem dragging wet snow. He's frantic because the king's advance guard is visible down the valley road and will want a light, warming luncheon, perhaps a roasted kid goat? You do not have goat. You have snow, swans, and a bunch of sick soldiers still sipping garlic broth. But you smile like a tavern sign and say, "Goat will be ready." As soon as he vanishes, you turn to the pantry, spot 3 half-grown lambs originally destined for shearing, and whisper, "Congratulations, you've been promoted." 20 minutes later, they're skinned, quartered, and spitted over flame, seasoned with rosemary stolen from the bishop's leftover journey cakes. Goat adjacent enough.
Meanwhile, you send the smallest scullion, a girl no bigger than a butter churn, out into the snow to flag down the sugar merchant's cart before it gets stuck. She returns teeth chattering, leading 2 oxen, pulling a wagon crusted in ice. Merchant wants triple normal price for his exotic cargo, but you flash the king's seal the steward lent you and promise payment from the royal purse. He mutters, unloads a single crate of coarse brown sugar, and trundles away swearing vengeance. You'll be safely behind castle walls by then, so who cares? Snow keeps falling, thicker now. The courtyard looks like someone shook a feather pillow until it exploded. You dispatch pages to salt the flagstones. Slipping nobles sue. Inside, soup cauldrons belch steam. You chop root vegetables with a speed born of fear, toss them into lamb stock, and add fistfuls of barley until the brew resembles wet gravel, the kind of stick-to-your-ribs fare that passes for comfort when frostbite threatens. 11 a.m. The advance guard, 10 knights in cloaks so white they disappear against the storm, stride into the great hall, stomping snow from boots. They look half-frozen and wholly unimpressed. You personally carry in trencher loaves filled with lamb stew, top each with a crust lid, and ladle spiced wine into pewter cups. One knight breaks through the bread, tastes, and announces, "Fine goat." You nod sagely, "Goat indeed." They devour everything and thaw enough to smile. But before you can bask, their captain warns you the full royal party accelerated. They'll arrive by dawn tomorrow, sooner if the wind shifts. Dawn? That shaves half a day off your prep schedule. Your heart does a backflip into your boots. Storm or not, you have to finish desserts tonight. Sugar crate cracked open. You stick a fingertip in, gritty, damp. You spread it over trays near the fire to dry, but time is short, so you whip egg whites from that chicken credit into peaks. Fold in sugar and pray meringue will set in the chill. Next, marzipan. Almonds were part of yesterday's barter. You grind them with mortar until your arms burn. Knead with honey. Form little castles and crowns. They're lopsided but charming. Call it rustic elegance. Afternoon, disaster o'clock. The mason dashes in, yelling that snow weight collapsed a portion of the kitchen roof eave. You run outside. Sure enough, a beam snapped. Now snow drifts onto your spice table like it wants to season itself. You and 4 servants nail a plank and hang cloth to block the gap, but frigid air keeps pouring through. Peppercorns freeze together. Saffron stiffens into brittle threads.
You scoop everything into crocks and slide them closer to the hearth, muttering threats at the weather gods.
Evening brings new visitors, royal tasters. 3 solemn men wearing badges shaped like tongues. Their job is to sample tomorrow's feast tonight, ensuring it won't murder His Majesty. That means every dish must be ready 12 hours early. You haven't even begun marinating the swans. You politely seat them near the fire and stall with trenchers of leftover lamb and cups of new brewed hippocras. They sip, whisper, note flavors. You scramble to pluck swans. Feathers come out tougher than pigeons, quills like needles. One bird flails posthumously, almost stabs your eye. You keep going until your arms look like you wrestled a thorn bush. You decide on 2 preparations, 1 swan roasted whole, stuffed with apples, chestnuts, and prunes soaked in wine. The other jointed and simmered in saffron almond milk to show refinement. The 3rd bird you mince with pork fat, sage, and black pepper to stuff inside a pastry crust shaped like, ironically, a swan. Multi-course visual pun? Nobles love that. You work knife and cleaver like twin lightning bolts. Tasters finish their stalling meal and request official samples. Roasted swan isn't done, pastry not baked, stew still marrying flavors. Panic. You hand them bowls of thick vegetable pottage, claiming it's the king's starter. They slurp politely. While they chew, you sprint back, crank heat, baste the roasting swan with honey vinegar glaze until skin shines mahogany. A miracle! It looks edible. You carve a slice, plate with quick-fried sage leaves, and deliver. Tasters nibble, exchange nods. They take notes, leave with curt bows. You sag against the door, shaking with adrenaline. Midnight again. Snow finally eases, leaving eerie silence. You send everyone to their straw piles, but you stay up kneading dough for breakfast trenchers. Your hands move on autopilot while thoughts spin. King's preferences, sequence of dishes, wine pairings, table decor, sick soldiers, collapsed roof, weevil flour. You realize you haven't eaten since dawn. You gnaw a crust of hedgehog roll, cold but passable, and wash it down with dregs of ale that taste like bread perfume. Near 1 in the morning, the falconer barges in furious. His gloves are missing. You toss them back, feathers still stuck. He grumbles until you promise him the swan heads for his hunting dogs. Bribery again. He leaves muttering curses in Old Norse. You catch an hour of sleep leaning against a flour barrel, wake shivering, and stoke the fire. Roasted swan rests, pastry cooling, almond castles drying. You trance-walk through final details, polish platters with vinegar, fold linen into shapes vaguely resembling lilies, instruct servers on the precise order. First the pottage, then the boar, then the swan trio, followed by cheese, then the sugar course. Remember hand-washing bowls between fish and meat. Cross-flavoring is scandalous. Dawn cracks purple over horizon, and trumpet calls echo from the outer yard. They're here sooner than expected. You throw on your least stained apron, shove hair under cap, and march to the hall. The king enters surrounded by steam from his breath, cloak of ermine dragging slush. He looks half frozen, but eyes bright for spectacle. Servants help him remove gloves studded with rubies worth more than your entire village. He sits, thumps the table, and demands mulled ale. You pour from a pitcher kept warming by the hearth. He sips, sighs, content. Round 1 to you. Breakfast service begins. Oaten griddle cakes with honey, sausages of minced boar heart, creamy porridge dotted with dried cherries. Nobles rave, king nods. Then one courtier smirks and asks loudly whether these cherries are imported from Gascony. They're actually shriveled crab apples dyed with beet juice. You answer, your Grace's keen palate honors humble ingredients, which is fancy talk for mind your own plate. Laughter diffuses tension.
Mid-morning, you retreat to prep the grand banquet. Snow outside sparkles viciously, but inside heat and panic compete. You boil the salmon hauled in on slids by fisherfolk at dawn. Simmer it delicately so flesh stays pink. You whip egg whites, sugar, and rosewater into spires. Torch them over the hearth flame for gilded tips. One catch: sugar is scarce, so you stretch it with pulverized dried pear. If anyone notices, claim it's an innovative foreign glaze.
Noon. The steward barges in. The king wishes to tour the kitchen between hunts. He enjoys rustic authenticity. That means he's about to walk into your chaos. You wipe counters, hide the sack of half-frozen weevil flour under a bench, shove the sick soldier still vomiting into the pantry with a bucket, and compose your face. His Majesty enters, entourage in tow, pretending not to duck the lintel. He sniffs the air, smiles, smells like victory. You nod, showing him the swan pastry. He claps like a delighted child, asks if it will sing when cut. You promise it will, meaning an apprentice will hide behind the draperies with a recorder flute to pipe a tune on cue. Crisis becomes theater. He notices the roof patch, raises an eyebrow. You bow and say, "The castle stands steadfast regardless of winter's jealousy." He laughs, slaps your shoulder hard enough to bruise, and exits. Once he's gone, you exhale a month's worth of anxiety in one puff. Afternoon hunt returns early, snow too deep, game scarce. That means the banquet moves up from dusk to late afternoon. You race against the hourglass. The boar, your boar saved from the dog, needs final roast heat. You slide it into the inferno, baste with cider, sprinkle powdered mustard seed. The swan stew thickens, you adjust salt. Pastry reheated so crust stays crisp. Everything is coming together, until a page announces the king's physician insists on sampling every dish personally, superseding the tasters. He arrives, face pinched like sour cheese, demands the list of ingredients. You hand him parchment scribbled last night. He declares saffron inflames the spleen and forbids it. Your swan stew, bright yellow with saffron. You stare, mind blank. Then inspiration. You ladle stew into a linen cloth, strain out liquid, rinse meat quickly in warm ale to wash pigment, then thicken a new sauce with ground almonds and parsley to hide the missing color. Same dish, different robe. Physician tastes, pronounces it pure. You resist the urge to kiss his bald head. Banquet hour, candles lit, harper plucking chords. You parade the dishes in order, servers trembling but steady. The king carves the roasted swan, crimson prune stuffing steaming. Recorder boy trills from behind curtains. Nobles gasp, applaud. The boar arrives next, apple in mouth, crackling skin. King slices off a hunk, juices cascade, he devours. Salmon emerges, glistening green sauce. Hedgehog rolls march around platters. Then the sugar course, marzipan castles, meringue peaks, candied rose petals. King bites a marzipan tower, teeth crunch, he murmurs, exquisite. You feel lightheaded, could be hunger, could be relief. But climax hasn't hit yet. You prepared a subtle finale, a wine fountain rigged with animal bladders to spout spiced hippocras from a carved wooden boar's mouth. You signal the scullery boy to pump bellows. Nothing. Again, just a sad dribble. Nobles stare. You rush over, realize cold has thickened wine into sludge. With no time, you snatch a torch, warm the wooden pipe. Liquid loosens, fountain gushes red wine, arching into silver goblet. Nobles cheer, success snatched from Frost's jaws. The feast stretches into singing, dice, storytellers. You stand in shadows, legs numb, heart soaring. Somewhere in the middle of a ballad about St. George, you slip away, collapse onto a bench, finally eat a slice of swan pastry still warm. Flaky crust, rich meat, hint of pork fat and cloves. Best thing you've eaten in months, and you cooked it. Midnight again. King retires, satisfied. Nobles stumble to beds. Servants clear wreckage. You supervise until candles gutter. Then steward approaches with a parchment. You dread more demands, but he claps your shoulder. His Majesty decrees a reward, 20 silver pennies, and the title Master of Hearths for the duration of his stay. 20 pennies! That's more money than you've held at once. You nearly weep. But joy is brief. Stewardship also means responsibility. Tomorrow launches day 2 of royal visit. Hunting breakfast, midday collation, evening mask supper. Yet compared to today's gauntlet, you feel almost confident. You survived snow, swans, tasters, physicians, and a wine fountain mutiny. You finally drag yourself to the straw pallet, shoes still on, and let sleep fall like a cleaver. Last thoughts. Maybe after the king leaves, you'll use those silver pennies to buy a real mattress, one not previously occupied by livestock. Dream big. You wake to a slap of bells and the unmistakable perfume of wet dog and spilled hippocras. Your eyelids feel sandpapered, your back is a map of bruises, and your tongue has fused itself to the roof of your mouth with a paste made from panic and leftover marzipan. Congratulations! Royal visit day 2. If yesterday was a trial by swan, today is a trial by spectacle, because His Majesty announced sometime after his 3rd goblet of fountain wine that tonight there will be a masque. Not just any masque, a pageant celebrating the noble triumph of winter over heathen chaos, which is artistic code for you must serve food that looks like snow, tastes like victory, and ideally doesn't kill anyone with botulism. The steward delivers the news while you're still pulling straw out of your hair. The king wants white dishes, he says, eyes bloodshot, pure, pristine, symbolic. Also a centerpiece made entirely of sugar that can survive an indoor snowstorm of flour tossed from the minstrel gallery. He smiles in the way people do when they're secretly hoping you'll faint so they can blame the disaster on someone else. You do not faint. You nod, swallow the scream, and mentally draft a menu. Pike poached in milk, creamed leeks, blancmange thickened with almond and rice, snow eggs floating on vanilla custard, and for drama, a marchpane sculpture dusted in sugar as fine as frost. Easy if you had 3 days, 20 pastry chefs, and a functioning roof. First problem, milk. The dairy cart hasn't arrived because the storm iced the lane solid. Without milk, there is no blancmange, no snow eggs, no white anything except sadness. You send 2 teenage scullions with buckets to the cows in the outer pasture. They trudge off through knee-deep drifts, promising they'll return before the king finishes sharpening his appetite. While you wait, you start breakfast. Barley porridge again, but jazzed up with a ribbon of honey and a pinch of cinnamon smuggled from yesterday's spice chest. You learned your lesson. Nobles love novelty. So you roast a handful of hazelnuts, crush them with the flat of a cleaver, and sprinkle on top. Ta-da! Barley deluxe. The court wakes, sniffs, and files in wearing furs that still smell like living bears. They slurp happily. King declares it robust, which is monarch speak for won't write a ballad about it, but acceptable. Scullions return white-faced. Cows are gone. Overnight, a band of opportunistic peasants, driven desperate by snow-blocked trade routes, led the herd to safer pasture, meaning anywhere outside royal taxes. No cows, no milk, no blancmange. You bite your knuckle hard enough to taste iron. Plan B, almonds. Plenty left from yesterday's marzipan. Almond milk can fake dairy in blancmange and snow eggs if you boil it with rice flour and sugar. Crisis bent, not broken. You send an undercook to crack and soak almonds while you tackle lunch, because a king who hunts in heavy snow still expects a light repast heavy on protein. You thaw the last of the river eels, slice them into silvery ribbons, poach gently in vinegar. Smell makes one server gag. You hand her a sprig of mint to sniff until gagging passes. Eel salad atop greens dusted with breadcrumbs passes muster and disappears into royal bellies before you can wipe the board. But lunch is barely cleared when the steward is back, sweating. The king's astrologer predicted an omen in tonight's mask. Something about a crown of flame, a plague cart, and a bleeding moon. His Majesty, never one to miss a theatrical cue, now wants a flaming pudding arriving on a miniature cart shaped like the Black Death's wagon. Oh, and the pudding itself must bleed red sauce when sliced, because symbolism. Fire plus blood plus pastry equals potential barbecue disaster, but you nod like a puppet because refusing would cost you your new title and maybe your head. You recruit the blacksmith's apprentice, he's 16 and mostly unsupervised, to repurpose a toy cart. He hammers iron sheets until sparks fly, riveting a box the size of a stump. Wheels greased with tallow. You drill air holes, leaving space for a clay pot full of pitch-soaked rags. When lit, the flames should lick through slots without igniting the cart. Probably, maybe. You'll test it outside first, far from draperies and royalty. For the pudding, you choose white bread crumbs, suet, chopped almonds, and raisins soaked in hippocras. You bind with almond milk and eggs, mold into a dome, and hide inside a bladder of pig's blood mixed with wine and sugar, your bleeding moon. Once steamed, the pudding will be white outside. Slice it, blood bursts. Macabre showstopper, perfect match for winter overcoming chaos. Afternoon threatens another crisis. The collapsed eave finally gives up. Snow melts on the hearthstone and douses half the fire. Smoke bellows, chimney sulks, and suddenly the kitchen is a sauna made of wet ash. You bark orders, haul pans aside, relight logs with splinters from broken barrels, and assign the smallest page to stand on a stool fanning smoke up the flue. He coughs but salutes. You'll owe him an extra honey biscuit. Meanwhile, plague rumors slither in with the returning hunters. They found a cart on the forest road, a real plague cart, bells clanking, piled with corpses dusted in snow. Driver dead, black spots on his cheek. Panic sets in faster than wildfire in a hayloft. Guards seal gates, clergy mutter prayers, and the king demands a purge of miasmas by burning pitch torches in corridors. The irony that you are deliberately setting a pudding on fire later is not lost on you. But plague hysteria could also ruin the mask if courtiers refuse to gather. You need morale and food to override fear. You whisper to the minstrel, "Tonight, between courses, play upbeat tavern reels, nothing funeral." He agrees, mostly because you promise him leftover marzipan castles. Then you tell the steward that hot spiced wine with juniper will ward off humors. He nods, eager to believe. You double the recipe and keep cauldrons simmering so hallways smell like courage instead of contagion. Evening falls purple and blue, candles lit along tapestries. Kitchen hums like a kicked beehive. You strain your almond blancmange, pour into shallow dishes, and let it set to a wobble as pale as moonlight. On top, you scatter sugared rosemary needles, edible evergreen for winter flair. For snow eggs, you whip egg whites with almond milk, poach spoonfuls in simmering sweet wine until they puff like cloud pillows. Then float them on custard tinted faint gold with saffron dust. You'll call it sunrise reflecting off snow. Physician be damned. 5 minutes to service. You wheel the flaming plague cart outside for a test. Torch touches pitch. Flames roar bright blue. Perfect. But gust of wind tilts the cart. One wheel wobbles, axle squeals. You adjust, tighten leather latch, extinguish, reload, pray. Your forehead drips sweat even though air is icicle sharp. First course, creamed leeks in bread trenchers shaped like ice blocks. You send them out. Hall buzzes. Musicians strike lively chords. No screams yet. Good sign. Second course, pike in milk sauce, garnished with parsley snowflakes. Plates return scraped. Third course, roasted capon, glazed with white wine and honey, dusted with powdered ginger to mimic frost. King licks his fingers, literally. You allow yourself a half smile. Now the moment. You dim torches near the hearth. Signal the blacksmith's apprentice. He lights the cart inside courtyard, then, wearing leather gauntlets, pushes it into the hall. Flames dance through slits, licking mirrored shields placed along the aisle for reflection. Gasps ripple. 2 ladies faint, but politely. The cart stops before the dais. You lift the lid with tongs, revealing the white pudding sitting in a brass dish. Flames frame it like a halo. King stands, dagger ready, slices. Crimson wine blood fountains onto silver charger. The hall erupts in cheers, half horror, half glee. Plague omen satisfied but controlled, and winter conquers. As servants sprinkle flour from balconies, instant indoor snowstorm. Your blancmange glows under drifting powder like frozen ponds. People laugh, dance, forget the real plague cart outside. Success tastes sweeter than all the sugar in Christendom. But you're not done. Dessert finale, the Marchpane Castle. Scullions march forward carrying it on a shield. You designed towers stuffed with pear and almond cream, walls stuck with sugared rose petals. As they lower it to the table, a loose flagstone trips one boy. Castle tilts, but you catch a turret before it crashes. Only minor lance damage. Nobles applaud, thinking it part of the show. Midnight again. King retires grinning, steward drunk on relief. You hobble back to the kitchen where exhausted staff sprawl like defeated soldiers. You hand out wedges of leftover pudding, the non-bloody edge parts, and mugs of warm ale. Everyone toasts to survival. You count burns. 3 new on your forearm, 2 blisters on palm, a mysterious bruise shaped like a swan beak on thigh. Worth it. Just as you're about to collapse, a guard appears. Cook, the Queen's courier has arrived ahead of schedule. Her entourage will be here by dawn, craving delicate fare. None of this barbarous blood business. He shrugs apologetically. Apparently, the king's wife wasn't invited to his winter triumph, but decided to visit anyway. Politics you can't taste, but you will definitely have to serve. You nod, already calculating. Lighter dishes, maybe rosewater jellies, sugared violets, delicate fish quenelles, and no flaming plague carts. You shoo everyone to sleep, but again you stay up, cracking more almonds, soaking dried apricots in white wine, grinding rice into flour with a pestle until your shoulders ache. You plan to mold little swan-shaped blancmanges to honor yesterday's triumph, but make them dainty, queen-appropriate. As the sky lightens, you finally slump against the warm stones, eyelids fluttering. In the doorway, the scullery girl, the one who fetched sugar in the storm, brings you a cup of water. Clean, clear, boiled first like you taught her. You sip, taste life, smile, and realize you might actually be teaching these kids something beyond survival. A strange warmth glows in your chest, stronger than fire. Maybe that's victory, or maybe just exhaustion. The rooster crows. Again. You drag yourself up, straighten apron number 3, least stained, and face the new dawn. Day 3 of royal visit, but technically day 5 of this saga we're living. You whisper to the empty pots, "Let's dance, old friends," and start slicing apricots. Take a deep breath, because dawn just barged in with a trumpet section and zero chill. The courtyard is crawling with hooves, heralds, and ladies-in-waiting wrapped in so much brocade you could upholster a cathedral. That's right, the queen has arrived. Her litter glides through the snow like a gilded coffin, curtains drawn, perfumed steam puffing from braziers at each corner so she doesn't accidentally inhale common frost. By the time you stumble out to bow and make sure no one parks a horse on the firewood pile, you can already taste the trouble. Clove, lavender, and political tension. Word spreads faster than butter on a hot trencher. Her Majesty spent the overnight ride composing a grievance list. Top items. 1. Her husband's unadvertised winter Triumph rebrand. She prefers Epiphany Vigil. 2. Rumors of plague theatrics involving blood desserts. And 3. The intolerable absence of swan-down pillows in the guest chambers. You, unfortunately, are now tethered to all 3 issues, because nothing smooths a regal temper like perfectly timed pastries. Or so you pray. You sprint back to the kitchen and convene a war council. The pastry mistress with flour in her hair, the blacksmith's apprentice still smelling of pitch, and 2 scullions whose entire leadership experience is carried milk, didn't spill much. Agenda: design a breakfast delicate enough to charm a frostbitten monarch, safe enough to skirt plague paranoia, and fancy enough to outshine last night's flaming blood pudding without looking like you're showing off. Easy as wrestling a bear in butter. Step 1. Colors. The queen loves pale pinks and pastels. The king loves bragging rights. Solution: rosewater jellies that sparkle like frozen dawn, topped with spun sugar crowns. Pretty enough for Her Majesty, elaborate enough for his ego. You set the sugar to boil, whispering coaxing promises so it doesn't burn. Then send a runner to raid the herb garden for the last sleeping roses. They come back with petals half brown from frostbite, but beggars can't lecture botany. You steep them anyway, tint the syrup with a beet the size of the baby's fist, and watch the liquid bloom to blush. While that cools, you tackle protein. The queen famously dines like a songbird, except when she doesn't, in which case she'll devour half a boar and 4 apologies. Hedge your bets. Tiny trout quenelles poached in white wine, served on ceramic shells dusted with edible gold. The steward finds a pouch left from coronation season. He winks and mutters something about recycling taxes. Each quenelle gets a chive stem tied in a bow so it looks like a present. Presentation matters. Politics is just plate arranging with crown funding. Mid-whisk, you hear a crash. The scullery girl dropped a crock of almond milk, flooding the flagstones. You almost bark, but her face is so pale you swallow the scold and help mop. She confesses she hasn't slept since the storm. Nightmares of plague carts, flaming wagons, and your screaming orders haunt her. You press a honey-dipped fig into her hand and tell her to sit by the hearth 5 minutes. Leadership 101. Save your people or your food will taste like fear. Breakfast trays depart. You hold your breath behind the kitchen door, listening. Murmurs rise, followed by a single, unmistakable clink of spoon on porcelain. Her Majesty scraping the bottom. Success. Not total. The king still complains the rose jellies remind him of last year's Heart of Spring banquet thrown by his cousin, the infamous one where a goat ate the choir books. But the queen smiles, which means the palace roof stays attached to your shoulders for at least another hour. Except the steward returns, throat bobbing. The king has rewritten tonight's schedule. There will be a reconciliation feast to prove all rumors of marital rift are scandalous nonsense spread by jealous dukes. Guests include the queen's confessor, 2 rival earls who once tried to duel over truffle tariffs, a bishop allergic to dairy, a Pomeranian ambassador rumored to poison rivals with nut oil, and, for extra spice, the king's favorite falconer, whose presence, everyone agrees, annoys the queen beyond measure. Oh, and after dinner, surprise engagement. The princess, yes, your awkward, poetry-addicted royal teen, will be pledged to marry the visiting Duke of Saxony. You must bake a betrothal cake big enough to hide a gold ring and delicate enough not to choke anyone if they swallow the wrong slice. Also, nut-free, dairy-free, wheat light, symbolic of unity and awe-inspiring. Serving time, midnight. You look at your watch. You don't own a watch. Time laughs. First, lunch for the queen's entourage. They request dainty fast day fare, nothing from cloven hoof or warm blood, because confession hour looms. You slap together a carrot and lentil pottage thickened with almond paste, garnish with parsley hearts, and send it flying. Side dish, pickled pear slices fanned like playing cards. Dessert, a single candied violet on a wafer of honey glass. They nibble, nod, scowl at each other's waistlines, and pronounce it virtuous. While they deliberate hymns, you start cake logistics. Wheat light means use spelt and oat. Nut-free means scrub every bowl like salvation. Dairy-free means almond milk again, but you're almost out of almonds. You dispatch the blacksmith's apprentice, now promoted to supply raider, to barter with the monastery. Offer the abbot tomorrow's surplus bones for soup if he'll spare 2 sacks of almonds and a jar of saffron. The apprentice gallops off on a mule named Regret. Next crisis, the falconer saunters into the scullery uninvited, hawk perched, feathers molting onto clean linen. He wants a quick snack for his ladybird. Raw rabbit hearts, warm if possible. You grit teeth, slice hearts, and watch the hawk gulp them down while the falconer brags about his new hunting glove trimmed with, wait for it, ermine, the queen's favorite fur. You sense sabotage potential. Ring cake, hawk feathers, queen's temper. You write a mental note. Keep falconer away from dessert table or risk public vivisection. Supply raid returns triumphantly, almonds clinking like treasure, saffron glowing in a vial. You roast, grind, fold into batter with honey and rosewater. Pour into 3 copper pans, nested so the ring can hide between layers. While the cakes rise, you craft icing from sugar boiled to pearl stage, then beaten with rosewater until it clouds. You swirl it into whirls, add candied angelica stems as vines, sugar pearls as buds. Unity blossoms. You leave a gap on top for the royal crest you'll pipe later when your hands stop shaking.
But before the cakes cool, thunder, a guard drags in a cowering kitchen boy. He was caught near the Pomeranian ambassador's luggage with a pouch of ground bitter almonds, cyanide central. The ambassador claims innocence. The boy confesses he was paid 3 pennies to mix powder into any royal dish that smells of roses. Target? Your cake. Motive? Trade treaty leverage, obviously. The guard eyes you. Can kitchen handle internal security? You nod. Who better to sniff almonds than the cook?
You isolate the cake layers in the larder under watch of 2 trusted scullions, the milk fetchers they owe you. You order fresh parchment seals pressed with your cook's signet, a spoon and a skull, so any tampering shows. You also brew a tiny bowl of almond-detecting syrup, vinegar and copper filings, turns green if poisoned. Old apothecary trick learned from a traveling friar who swapped recipes for a jug of your cider. You plan to test each slice tableside, theatrical and smart. Evening approaches. Snow relents. You hustle a supper preview for the king and queen in separate chambers so they can approve courses. Menu: saffron soup with pike quenelles, no dairy, roasted quail with juniper glaze, symbol of marital fidelity, don't laugh, root vegetable tart made with oat crust, and as palate cleanser, tiny ices flavored with orange peel and clove, imported outrageous, perfect. Both monarchs sign off, though the queen requests less juniper, more subtlety, and the king requests add bacon. You split the difference. Slip bacon under the quail skin so aroma pleases him, while plate looks pure for her. Culinary diplomacy. Banquet hour. Tapestries aired, torches trimmed, minstrels tuned. You line up servers like infantry. Soup lands first, golden, aromatic. The bishop slurps happily, no dairy sneeze. Great. Quail arrives, the queen tastes, arch eyebrow, then nods. King crunches hidden bacon, winks at you. Earls glare at each other over tart slices, but don't duel, progress. Ambassador from Pomerania toasts mutual respect with raspberry wine. He's either masking guilt or testing you. You keep eyes on him like a hawk on field mice. Mid-meal, disaster nips your heel. The falconer's hawk escapes, swoops across the hall, lands on the queen's chair, and deposits half-digested rabbit heart onto her embroidery. Screams, pandemonium. The queen's ladies flap fans, bishop drops spoon, ambassador pretends nothing happened, king laughs a little too loudly. You react. Grab linen, mop gently, present queen with a warm orange clove ice as aromatic rescue. She breathes in scent, calms. You dispatch guards to escort the falconer and bird to the mews. Crisis contained, except the stain shapes like, well, a heart. Courtiers will gossip for weeks. Finally, cake time. You roll it in on a wheeled board draped in silk, flanked by candle bearers. Gasps, good ones. You slice first wedge, drizzle syrup, no poison green. You serve pieces clockwise, bishop first, allergy check, ambassador fifth, watch his eyes, princess seventh, ring hunt. You announce that somewhere in these layers hides a symbol of new unity, the gold engagement ring. Whoever finds it claims first dance with the bride-to-be. Courtiers dig like badgers, but politely. Princess slices, chews, pauses, metal glints on her tongue. She retrieves the ring, cheeks crimson. Duke of Saxony meals, offers a rose, says something about eternal alliances and tributaries of affection. Applause. The queen dabs a tear. The king beams as though the whole plan was his idea. It wasn't. It was yours, pitched by a steward to distract them from plague rumors. The ambassador applauds too, maybe disappointed his poison plot fizzled. Shame.
Midnight bells, feast ends. Queen, finally content, thanks you by name. That never happens. She pronounces your cake a cathedral in flour. The king roars agreement, then asks if tomorrow you can recreate the flaming pudding, but with doves. You nod, sure you'll figure it out or die flambéed.
Exhausted staff drag benches into corners and fall asleep among pewter. You wander the now quiet hall, collecting stray candied violets, pocketing them for the scullery girl. As you turn to leave, the princess, ring now on finger, catches your sleeve. She whispers thank you, says your cake made her feel brave. She was terrified of this marriage, but the sweetness helped. You smile, unsure how sugar equals courage, but who are you to question alchemy?
Back in the kitchen, you trace cuts on your knuckles, count them like beads. Someone's placed a mug of small ale on the hearth for you. A note, for the cook who keeps the kingdom from starving itself with pride. Unsigned, but handwriting looks like the blacksmith's apprentice. You sip, taste smoke, almonds, and a hint of hope.
Outside, the sky clears at last, stars sharp as glass. Snow crunches, torches gutter, and somewhere a hawk screeches indignantly from its new cage. You exhale steam and plot tomorrow's dawn menu. Baked apples stuffed with ginger and raisins maybe. Something simple after all this grandeur.
But simplicity seldom sticks, because rumor already whispers that the Duke's entourage wants a breakfast tournament of sweet versus savory pies, judged by the bride, winner earning trading rights on salt routes. And the king just sent a message. The flaming dove pudding must open festivities at sunset. No pressure.
All right, insomniacs and history thrill seekers, crack your knuckles because Dawn just kicked the door open and hurled Part 7 straight at your face like a disgruntled juggler with too many torches. If you've been with me since the fleas, the fire, and the falcon mishap, thank you for surviving the sleepless marathon. If you somehow jumped in here first, welcome, strap in, and maybe check a pulse because the kitchen's about to turn into a full-blown diplomatic battleground. Ready? Good. Roosters are still clearing their throats when the Duke's steward delivers the latest friendly suggestion. Apparently, a mere breakfast feast isn't enough. The Saxon entourage wants a competitive spectacle, a culinary joust of sweet pies versus savory pies as a testament to harmonious contrasts. Translation, whoever wins earns exclusive salt route tariffs and enough bragging rights to flood minstrel songs from here to Krakow. The judges? The brand new, still blushing princess, the queen's confessor, and the rogue plague doctor who arrived uninvited at dawn to inspect public health compliance. Yes, the same masked ghoul rumored to trade in fermented fish sauce cures that smell like a dock worker's revenge. You pinch the bridge of your nose so hard you see saints. You've got 8 hours. Goal, produce 2 epic pies, one sweet, one savory, that make the Duke's pastry knights weep for mercy, and convince a plague doctor that bacteria are yesterday's gossip. Also remember you promised His Majesty a flaming pudding with live doves at sunset. And the falconer, currently pouting in the mews, has volunteered to handle bird logistics, which feels like volunteering a shark to babysit goldfish. First order, ingredients. Flour supplies are limping, almonds basically extinct, saffron cup scraping. But good news, the snowstorm dumped half the king's hunting preserve onto your doorstep. Deer carcasses everywhere, courtesy of guards who spent the night target practicing. Venison it is. You commission the blacksmith's apprentice, promoted again, congratulations, to build a portable spit that can rotate an entire haunch over cedar coals. While that roasts, you concoct a pastry base sturdy enough to hold gravy but delicate enough to shatter under a spoon. Lard and oat crust chilled in a snow-filled bucket. The secret? A splash of vinegar to shorten the gluten and your tears for extra seasoning.
Sweet pie brainstorming next. Apples are done, pears passé, plums bruised. But dried figs, raisins, and a lone crate of candied citron? Jackpot! You soak the dried fruit in spiced wine until plump as a bishop's purse. Then fold in honey, rosewater, and the last of the cinnamon shards you've been hoarding like contraband. For crust, you steal your own savory dough. Swap lard for olive oil. Health trend, 14th century keto, watch out. And braid the edge with strips of quince paste so it bakes into ruby glass.
Meanwhile, the plague doctor stalks through the scullery, sniffing surfaces with that beak mask like an offended stork. He dips a feather into every sauce, humming. You offer him mulled cider to warm his icy attitude. He accepts, then lectures on miasmatic fumes and how fermented fish sauce actually purifies the air. Great. He insists his barrel be opened during the judging for scientific demonstration. That barrel currently sits in the hall reeking like Poseidon's armpit after a full contact wrestling match. You nod politely, plot ventilation strategies, and ponder whether honeyed vinegar can mask aquatic doom.
Mid-morning, the confessor slides into the kitchen, robes swishing, eyes sharp. He whispers that the queen wants the sweet pie to contain a hidden marzipan dove holding a parchment verse, her private blessing for the young couple. It must remain secret until the first slice. Also, the parchment must be edible. You haven't slept in 48 hours, but sure, chewable literature sounds doable. You scrawl the verse on rice paper with saffron ink. May your love rise like bread, sweeten like honey, and never scorch like this poor cook's nerves. Okay, you cut the last bit. You roll the paper tight, wrap in sugar paste shaped like a dove, nestle it beneath the fig filling, and pray no judge bites straight into royal poetry. Lunch barrels toward you. Staff needs fuel. You toss together a chef's mistake stew of leftover trout bones, turnip tops, and rogue barley grains. Utterly unglamorous, but hot. They devour it in 15 minutes, bless you, and return to polishing platters until their reflections wink back exhausted.
Savory pie assembly time. Venison diced, browned with onions, juniper, and a dangerous pour of ale. Flambe fear is healthy. You thicken the gravy with rye breadcrumbs, sneak in chopped pickled walnuts for tang, then pour into the snow-cold crust. Top crust goes on, vented with tiny sword slashes. You paint it with egg so shiny it could double as a mirror for the Duke's ego.
Sweet pie next. Fruit mixture gurgling like gossip in cauldron, crust waiting, hidden dove ready. You ladle the filling, scatter crushed pepper for subtle heat. Romans swore by it, feels exotic. Seal, brush with almond milk glaze. Nut-free crisis solved thanks to you inventing imaginary almonds from pumpkin seeds. And carve a lattice pattern shaped like intertwining branches. Symbolic unity points unlocked.
While pies bake, you address the flaming dove pudding. Phase 1. Bake a dense spice cake inside a bronze mold shaped like a castle tower, hollow core left empty. Phase 2. Stuff that core with live doves. Obviously that's insane, but medieval folks shoved live frogs into pies for a laugh, so you roll with tradition. You bargain with the falconer. He will supply 6 docile white doves, trained not to panic, in exchange for a seat near the princess during judging. Slightly creepy, but you're out of leverage. You line the cavity with linen so birds don't suffocate from crumbs, then fit a sugar glass door you can snap open tableside.
For ignition, you mix brandy, cinnamon, and a pinch of saltpeter. Flame guarantee. Afternoon glow slants through frost-laced windows. Pies emerge golden, sweet, one jewel-toned glaze erupting in syrupy sighs. Savory one, smelling like victory and venison. You let them rest, post guards, and start choreographing airflow to combat fish sauce apocalypse. Open north shutters, station 2 maids with feather fans, prep bowls of rosemary-studied coals for aroma warfare. Judging hour arrives, great hall decked with winter roses, torches flaring. Princess glides in wearing a cloak of silver fox, cheeks bright. Duke of Saxony follows, mustache waxed into punctuation marks. Confessor carries incense burner. Plague doctor lugs his barrel like a reluctant groom clutching dowry. Courtiers jitter around long trestle tables where your pies sit on silver chargers, steam haloing. Herald calls order. First up, savory. You step forward, give the name Hearth-Forged Harmony. You slice, gravy glosses knife without spilling, serve wedges to trio. Princess closes eyes, chews, hums. Confessor murmurs something about divine grounding. Plague doctor frowns behind mask, but empties plate. Score whispers, strong start. Before sweet round, plague doctor demands his experiment. Barrel uncorked, room recoils as rotten ocean bouquet fills air. He claims the vapors will clear plague. You counter with science of your own. Rosemary coals plus orange peel smoke. You set bowls aflame. Fragrance battles fish doom in the rafters. Judges nod, impressed by your quick chemistry. Doctor, unbothered, blesses the process. Sweet pie unveiling. You announce winter's promise. Knife glides through lattice. Aroma of honeyed figs and citrus dazzles. Slices served. Princess forks a bite, pauses. Encounters marzipan dove, gasps softly. She reveals edible scroll, reads blessing aloud. Queen's eyes shimmer, court applauds. Duke presses hand to heart. Confessor beams, holy PR jackpot. Plague doctor? He requests second slice for microbial study. That's a yes, apparently. Herald tallies votes. Victory, you by unanimous awe. Salt wrote advantage now swings to the crown. The Duke applauds, likely plotting. King leaps up, declares you guardian of gastronomic glory. You resist urge to faint. But the evening is young. Flaming dove pudding finale awaits. You wheel the cake out, dim torches, and announce a beacon of peace. Brandy poured over sides, accidental waterfall onto floor. Note, risky. You strike flint. Blue flame roars upward. Gasps. You snap sugar door. Doves burst forth, wings beating fiery halo. Audience screams delight, ducking. Birds soar, circle, exit through open shutters into night. Perfect. Except one dove panics, dives toward plague doctor, smacks his mask, splash, knocks fish sauce barrel over. Liquid tsunami surges, douses flame, splatters confessor's robes, slops across throne dais. Silence, then pandemonium, stench, shrieks, slipping nobles. The king belly laughs until he hiccups. You leap to salvage, grab baskets of rosemary coals, toss into muck, sizzle, aromatic steam. Kitchen crew rush with sand, straw, and cloths. Within minutes, chaos calms. Queen, surprisingly amused, quips that even heaven-sent doves must have opinions on pseudoscientific cures. Confessor, dripping, forgives everyone. Plague Doctor extracts his mask, sniffs, admits fish sauce performs poorly in aerodynamics. You gift him ginger tisane as apology. He pledges to adjust theories. At last, music strikes. Princess and Duke dance, salt treaty sealed with twirl and curtsy. The court drifts into mellow chatter. You slump on bench, adrenaline evaporating like spilled brandy. Falconer sidles up, thanks you for consulting avian professionals, though he still owes the Queen an ermine apology. You shrug, offer him leftover sweet pie. He shares with Hawk, now leash-bound. Later, Queen requests private word. You kneel, worried. She smiles, real smile that melts frost from marble hearts. She praises breakfast jellies, lunchtime virtue, supper diplomacy, midnight drama, and your composure during fish-pocalypse. Then she says 4 words you never expected. Take the winter off. Turns out the royal summer estate needs a head of kitchens, and she's appointing you. Snowless months, citrus orchards, better pay, and rumor of tiled ovens that heat evenly. You bite tongue to stop squeal, bow low, accept. King slaps your back, declares he'll miss the delicious terror you inspire, but you promise to leave recipes. Courtiers disperse. Minstrels pack lutes. Fires die to embers. You wander kitchen one last time. Tables scarred, copper pots soot-kissed, walls smelling of bread and destiny. Scullery girl asleep by hearth. Cat curled atop her apron. You drape a cloak over them. Outside, stars cold, moon bright. You inhale crisp air, no fish undertone left. Snowflakes drift like stray flower. Distant owl hoots, maybe jealous your shift finally ends. You realize you're happy, exhausted, blistered, but alive, promoted, and maybe, just maybe, ready to cook for pleasure again. So, friend watching from the comfort of Wi-Fi and central heating, next time you grumble about reheating leftovers at 2 a.m., remember the castle cook who juggled plague doctors, flaming poultry, and diplomatic pies while lice plotted hostile takeovers. If you enjoyed this midnight saga of stress baking and medieval mayhem, smash that like button. Gently, we used it to prop a pastry. Subscribe if you want more sleepless dives into history's messy kitchens, and drop a comment telling me which part of tonight's chaos would have sent you sprinting for the nearest monastery. Also, curious, what snack are you munching while listening? Dim the screen, fluff your spotless pillows, and thank every inventor of plumbing, refrigeration, and non-explosive dessert design. I'll be back soon with another tale that proves the past wasn't simpler. It was simply terrifying and occasionally delicious. Until then, sleep tight, dream sweet, and keep your doves fire-free. Good night.